he started Googling, and within, he said it's the second or third page of Google results, he was like, his exact words are, I'm seeing things that I shouldn't be seeing. So what it turns out was that at 5 bases across Europe, soldiers on those bases had been using those apps to learn what was the secret password, where's the security camera, where are the nuclear weapons. We began to see information like that on searches on Google.
Czech Center for Investigative Reporting and Dark Riviera present Protagonista, a war room content project hosted by Pavla Holcová. Protagonista puts investigative reporters at the heart of the story. Eoghan Macguire is the Scottish lead editor of Bellingcat, a pioneering force in open source investigation. He reveals a high school hoax launched his journalism career and demonstrates how digging through the internet exposes crimes, including the killing of an Al Jazeera journalist by Israeli forces. So, Eoghan, how did you get into journalism?
I need to think back now. So I, in a previous life, worked at an investment bank, and I absolutely hated it. I'd always wanted to do journalism when I was younger, but there wasn't really anywhere to study journalism in Scotland at the time. I wanted to begin, so I went to university and I studied business law and marketing.
Oh, come on! I'm not now talking about I studied journalism. I would like to hear the story. What inspired you to even consider it?
So I don't know if it inspired me, but it certainly made me consider it. When I was my first week at high school, a story broke in the news in Scotland that a pupil who had been there in the years before had actually, instead of being a teenager, actually been a 30-year-old man, and he'd managed to fool the school into accepting him, and came back, and he did 2 years of high school.
So there was a guy, 30 years old, sitting with a
in
teenage
a class with 16,
classmates.
17-year-olds, yeah.
Why did he do it?
He wanted to study medicine, and at the time in Scotland there was a rule that you had to be under 30 to be accepted to courses in medicine at university. So he decided that he would just, he was 30 obviously, so he decided that instead of going and doing his school qualifications in a further education institution, he was going to try and kid everyone on that he was actually still a teenager, and go back to school. So he did that, and it came out in the press, and the first weeks of school, always remember it, it was just wall-to-wall media outside the school, and we as school kids would come out and be journalists there, and they'd be kind of asking us questions and things, and I thought that seems like an interesting job. It seems quite fun. They were quite fun. They were interesting people. So I think that's where it wasn't like a massive inspiration. I want to be a journalist at that point, but I think that stuck in my head, that seemed like a cool job.
So when there were cameras, did you just, group behind the person talking and do all the fuck you, fuck you, fuck you?
There was a little bit of that. There was like kids where, I always remember this, is so funny, there was like kids were trying to ruin the shots of the news cameramen taking their videos and things. And it was like the school bus was going past and people were like mooning out the window and stuff. And journalists would ask them questions and people would just make stuff up.
Make stuff up?
Yeah, just obvious, like ridiculous things like, oh yeah, I heard that he, I don't know, was a spy for someone, just making ridiculous things up.
And did you watch in the evening yourself on a TV? So
that was kind of the aim. People would go out and they would like try and get in the shot and then run home and see if you were on the 6 o'clock news. It was like a week of this. There was a crane up outside the school, and there was like a cameraman on top of the crane, and it was going to the live feed, and yeah.
And then you went through quite a way and quite couple of previous jobs, and you landed at Bellingcat as a lead editor. Mm-hmm. I guess you get this question a lot. What does it mean, Bellingcat?
So it comes from the Aesop fable to Bell the cat. So the story of a particularly nasty cat, and the mice are afraid of the cat, and they have a meeting and they decide they're going to put a bell on the cat, so when the cat's coming, the mice can hear the bell, but then none of the cats are brave enough to put the bell on the mice. So that was the kind of the idea. There's lots of these open source investigators who are the mice, putting the bell on the angry dictator, the cat, or the person who's lying to the broader public, I guess, about what happened.
What means, well, you actually do it because you really make very powerful people quite angry.
Yeah. So do you.
No. So who's really unhappy about your reporting, to put it diplomatically? Is it like Russian Secret Service because you disclosed how they operate?
I imagine they're not happy. Yeah, I mean, Bellingcat's an undesirable organisation within Russia, which means that anyone who even quotes us has to say that they're quoting Bellingcat, an undesirable organisation. So that, it kind of silences media coverage of Bellingcat in Russia. So yeah, the Russian secret services, I'm guessing Vladimir Putin, Assad would not have liked this. I think anyone who's got something to hide has done something wrong.
Okay. So what was your first story? You are editor.
So I'm the lead editor at Bellingcat. So I've got a team of editors who work with me, and then also the social media team. And then we've got a team of researchers who do all the kind of investigations and things, and they come to us with the stories, and we help them tell their stories. So the first story that I worked on was, I looked back at it because I knew I was coming to speak to you, and I was like, man, our storytelling has developed so much since then. But it was about apparent US missile strikes that had hit medical facilities in Syria around 2016, 2017, 2018. And it was really dense, really long, just kind of like, here is incident, here is what the open source information tells us, here's the response from the US military, that type of thing. And it was just a list of 5, 6, 7 potential incidents. And to me, it was really interesting to do that because it was looking at US airstrikes in Syria, and everyone had been looking at Russian airstrikes in Syria. So that was, a very interesting one to begin with.
So part of the method you use at Bellingcat is that you actually don't really have people on the ground. How do you do it?
So I guess you see we don't have people on the ground, but a lot of the time there will be someone on the ground and they will post something to the internet. And then from the information that they've posted, we can deduce certain things. Maybe we can deduce what's happened. Maybe there's a technological solution to find out, who did what. So, for example, MH17, even though I wasn't involved in that, it was using social media that people had posted, very often Russian soldiers that had unwittingly posted, to track the journey of this missile from Russia, into eastern Ukraine. And the Russians were denying that this missile had come there, but in actual fact, the social media footage from Ukrainians who were in eastern Ukraine and from Russian soldiers showed otherwise.
Don't you miss it? Like being on the ground, talking to the people, kind of doing the job yourself?
There's an aspect of that, but then there's also, I just find this it's like a little mystery piecing it together. I just find it really, really interesting. I can't say that. Honestly, I can't say that I do miss it. I find this method and way of doing things really satisfying. I find it really powerful as well. And if you look at, to me anyway, you look at the way journalism has gone over the last 10 years. When Bellingcat started, nobody was doing this, and now you've got the New York Times visual investigations team,
well,
BBC
they have your
No, they've hired a lot of people. Yeah, they've hired a lot of people from us. They've got BBC, Le Monde, Financial Times, all these, Washington Post, all these places now have their open source units because they see the power of it.
Let's now talk about a story that you investigated of an assassination of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you haven't been there. You didn't see the shooting. You only had some kind of a leads from social networks, and so how did you do the story? It's assassination.
So when like a lot of media at the time, became apparent that Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a journalist for Al Jazeera, she was covering an Israeli raid in Jenin in May 2022. She and during this operation, she was shot in the head and killed. There was journalists on the scene who said she was targeted and shot deliberately by the Israeli.
She didn't wear the press thing.
She had
helmet.
She had the press vest on. She had helmet on, and journalists at the scene said that she was targeted and she was shot and killed.
Targeted by whom?
So by the Israeli military. The Israeli military initially came out and said, we're investigating what's happened. There was the president of Israel at the time, Naftali Bennett, said that he initially said it was actually stray fire from Palestinian militants that killed her. Then afterwards said, maybe it could have been the IDF, but left it kind of, it could be either or.
Why would Israeli military target her?
That's a good question. You'd have to ask them that question. But what we found, so we decided, okay, let's see what we can piece together. And there was video of the moments after she'd been killed. So the shooting was still continuing. You could see her body on the ground. There was another journalist who was with her who was crouching for cover, and you could see shots being fired towards her. There was video before of Israeli military coming into the neighbourhood, of Palestinian militants as well firing within this neighbourhood. So we decided, okay, there's competing narratives here. There's people who are on both sides of the argument, Israeli or Palestinian, and they're putting forward their version online. Let's see what can happen. Let's see what we can find out with the information that's available. So that's what we did.
How?
So a number of ways. Looking at the social media footage. So first of all, showing that Israeli military were there at that time when they arrived, chronolocating videos, and we do that in various ways. Sometimes it was as simple as a Facebook live video showed military in a particular street, and then we can say, okay, because it's on Facebook Live, it's been published at that time, and then you can use Google Maps and other types of mapping services to show exactly where that is. We looked at the videos of the Palestinian militants firing weapons, and we found out exactly where that was. It was like, okay, that's there. We didn't have a rough timescale, but we could tell the direction that they were firing in and where they were. We then asked a sound analysis expert. We showed them the video of that was released of where you could see Shireen Abu Akleh's body and the other journalist still crouching for cover.
What could you learn from a sound of a shooting?
So
was recorded on
that was on the video. So he could say, okay, looking at the video from the position of the camera, and the Palestinian authorities handed over the bullet that had killed Shireen Abu Akleh for analysis. So
to you or
no to I think it was to the Americans who performed that analysis, and they released the photo, so you could tell the type of weapon that the bullet was from. So if you take the sound analysis, so when you hear the shot fired on the video, and with the bullet, you can assess what kind of weapon it was, and from the time that so there's a kind of sound. So from that you can tell roughly, or you can gauge roughly how far away at the speed that was travelling when the camera would pick that up. So with that, if you know the speed, you can calculate the distance, and then you can create a radius for where the shot would have been fired from. Now you're not going to get the actual direction because you have to do more to find that out. But within that radius, you could say, okay, there's nothing here. There's a graveyard here. There's a really tall building there. There's this, here's where the Israeli military are, and here's where the Palestinian militants who were firing the weapons were. So the shot would have had to been fired from within 180 metres, and the Palestinian militants who were filmed shooting were something like 250 metres away. The Israeli military was like 175 metres away. Also, social media footage showed that from where the Israeli military were stationed, there was a very narrow path to where Shireen Abu Akleh's body was found, and also markings on the tree as well of bullets that obviously had been close and missed, and it appeared to be coming from the direction of the Israeli military. And also as well, one thing that's also quite important to note is that when you see the videos, it's very kind of so it seems targeted. It's not random kind of fire. So we basically put all that information out there and said, We didn't say who was responsible. We just said this is what we can find, or this is what we found, and it's the Israeli military. So the implication is obviously that it was probably the IDF, the Israeli military, that were responsible. So we published that 2 days after the incident happened, and then the New York Times, CNN, Al Jazeera, a number of other organisations followed up with their own investigations and found similar.
When you need to watch this kind of videos of shooting of a journalist, and how do you make it that, you stay away from it? I would get really emotional because, to seeing someone who's being shot for doing journalism is just not a good experience.
No, I mean it's not nice to watch those videos. So I never felt I never felt that I was like, this is having a real effect on me until I went on sabbatical and I met you. And so when I was on sabbatical, that's when the war in Gaza started, and I was following what was happening on social media, on Telegram, on Twitter, and that was the first time that I was looking at these videos because I wasn't working at the time, without a reason to for work, and I found that was having an impact on me, or it was making me feel really, really down and really not nice. And I kind of logically trying to piece things together in my head was like, is this because there's not a purpose to this now? Like when I'm, maybe people in Bellingcat will tell you different, they've got different thresholds, but for me it seemed to be when there wasn't okay, we're looking for a finding here, there's a reason for doing this, it seemed to impact me more. Yeah. So
it's not part of the job, it's immediately part of your life when you are watching it without...
That's my experience. That's what it feels like. I feel like I've been able to compartmentalise it in a way, or come up with a logic, unintentionally in my head that there's a reason for doing this. But still, even with that, if there's a goal or if there's a investigative purpose for doing it, I think I'm able to kind of say, okay, this is, and I'm able to stop that impact on me. But then, when there doesn't seem to be, that's when it seems to have more of an effect on me.
Let's talk about public interest, because that's something we use quite often as a journalist. We need to consider public interest. We publish it in public interest, but we are also ruining lives of people by our investigations. So how do you approach this? Where do you see the line between public interest and not so much of a public interest?
That's a very good question. I think this is such a weak answer, but it's kind of like case by case, isn't it?
Of course it is, but still, you did a story on killing of a journalist who's being shot. You did a story on nuclear weapons. You always need to consider it. So what is your mental process in considering, yes, we are going to do it, it's going to cause a lot of damage, it will put us in danger, but it is in public interest?
Mm-hmm. So I guess there's lots of factors that you consider. The harm, who's being harmed. Like, we'll always try and, if there's a focus of an investigation, say they're someone who's doing some really bad stuff, they might be doing really bad stuff, but their family members, they're just, they're family members. Like, try and keep them out of it. Don't needlessly bring them into it. We spoke about the nuclear weapon story. Again, there's a danger in reporting that, because that's very private information that could cause, or from a security perspective, it
could cause a lot of damage, like nuclear war.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's also, if we don't report on that, there's also the chance that someone else who has worse intentions than we have comes along and finds that and actually does cause that damage.
Is there any way how to get ready? That you will know those people will be upset. Sometimes you start to understand the motivation, why they did what they did, and you kind of feel sorry for them. And at the same time, what they did was wrong. Mm-hmm. So you're the judge.
I guess so. I mean, you always give. It's really important to give the person that you are reporting on the right to tell their side of the story, a right of reply. that's only fair. And we'll always give them time to do that and time to respond to what we're accusing them of and saying in our stories. That's only fair.
So let's get to another story that you did that's much more fun.
So this is one that wasn't fun for the person it was about.
No, like it was quite dark so far. No, let's talk about, a major organized crime personality being a foodie.
Yeah.
And you tracked him down, even though, the police was not really able to find out where is he living, where is he hiding.
Yeah. So this is also someone you know very well. So this is Christopher Kinahan. I don't know, you'll be able to describe what he does more than me, or who he is more than me.
Yeah, well, it's a founder of a criminal group that's recently called the Kinahans, and they are a member of so-called super cartel, what means a very powerful group of different organized criminal groups who are bringing cocaine and methamphetamine and hashish to Europe and trading it and pushing the prices in South America down at the same time, keeping the prices in Europe up. And they are brutal, they are violent, and they have a shit ton of money.
That's about it, yeah. So the founder of the Kinahan cartel, Christy Kinahan, who's Irish, they're an Irish group. He has two sons who all three are wanted by the US Treasury. There's a $5 million bounty on their head. They're all based in Dubai, and they've been there since the US Treasury announced they were sanctioned and that they were looking for them. Looking for any information.
So they are kind of most wanted.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of, they're on the wanted list. And they've got the posters up with the wanted. It's very kind of cowboy, very Wild Wild West. The origin of this story is almost amazing as the origin itself, and it's very Bellingcat. We received an email to our contact at Bellingcat email address, and it was from a young man who had lost his job. He liked Bellingcat, he liked digging into things, the investigations, online investigations. And I'm just going to look into the Kinahans and see if I can find anything online. Yeah, so we essentially opened up our emails and we looked at it, and it was like, maybe something in this. So what he had done was, there'd been reporting previously that Christopher Kinahan, or Christy Kinahan, had been using an alias and had a LinkedIn account called Christopher Vincent, which is like not the most. It's not, he's not Batman. He's dressed up as, he's not Bruce Wayne, and he's put on a suit and taken this other online personality. He'd used his first name and his middle name, and he had a LinkedIn account, and he'd been posting all sorts of things like anti-globalist stuff and criticising Joe Biden, and Irish media had reported that Christopher Vincent was Christopher Kinahan, and it was like, oh my God, this guy's such a boomer. So he's posting from Dubai about all these things. So he decided, okay, I'm gonna look and see if I can find anything. So again, he went to Google, and he knew that he knew that the Kinahans were known to be in Dubai. So he started Googling Christopher Vincent plus, so the Google search operator plus, and then he would go through different areas of Dubai to see if anything came up. So he typed in one area, and there was a restaurant review for a steakhouse in this particular area of Dubai, and it talked about how the steak was done well. The steak was well done, which a lot of people afterwards commented that this is as much of a crime as all the drugs. But Christopher Vincent linked out to a Google review account. So this restaurant had obviously been Googling itself, taken the review from Google Review and put it on its website. When you click through to the Google Review, it's this 1,000 pictures, over 1,000 reviews from Christopher Vincent. So it's like, all right, if this is really Christopher Kinahan, he's left a lot of information on here. So he was very careful not to show himself in any of the pictures that he published, or to refer to himself as Christopher Kinahan. But there was loads of restaurant reviews, from lots in Dubai, but from previous years, from Spain, the Netherlands, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Egypt, lots of different countries. I think it was like 11 countries altogether. Prague as well, Czech Republic.
Was the steak well done in Prague?
I think he was reviewing a hotel in Prague, so we never got to know what the stakes were like in Prague, unfortunately, according to Christopher Vincent. So obviously we had to try and verify that this was him. It was like, it's potentially him. This is interesting. On one of the many pictures we looked at, or on a couple of them, he'd taken them in front of a window. So he'd obviously not realised that his reflection was in the photograph, and then when you compare side by side, it looks a hell of a lot like him.
I would probably miss it. I have to be honest.
Again,
if I would see the window, I would miss that there's the reflection.
Yeah. It's like that obsessive attention to detail that, you know, people who are really good open source or source investigators have. And you got the email address, and it turns out that email address was also an email address that was in there, the US Department of Treasury had put out in its wanted notice for Christopher Kinahan as well. So it was like, boom, got it. And one of the again, like, there was a cafe that he'd gone to in Dubai, but Connor had then gone to the Instagram page of this restaurant and just started scrolling through, and lo and behold, someone else at that restaurant had taken a picture, and you just see the restaurant, and in the background is Christopher Kinahan talking to his son Christopher Jr., who's also wanted by the US Department of Treasury. And it's like, that is amazing. So that was the most recent, I think at the time, that was the most recent known picture of the two of them together.
If you are able to do this job, why not US Treasury? Why they just don't go and arrest him in Dubai?
That's a really good question. Their resources are obviously far greater. The government of Ireland is obviously far greater than Bellingcat. Again, it's the creative thinking of just the one individual, I guess.